Hello and welcome back to Lauren's Legends. I hope you are having a wonderful day. The story that we will be talking about today has actually been featured on many episodes of TV shows, including The X-Files. We will be talking about Gloria Ramirez, the toxic lady. Gloria Ramirez was a 31-year-old woman suffering from the late stages of cervical cancer. On February 19, 1994, an ambulance was called to her residence. She was taken to the Riverside General Hospital in California and arrived at 8:15 p.m. When she arrived, the nursing staff surrounded the ambulance and helped her out of it. They immediately noticed that she was having severe heart palpitations, and she was extremely confused, and she was experiencing horrible breathing problems. The medical staff immediately got her inside of the hospital's ER. Once in the ER, they administered diazepam, midazolam, lorazepam. This will normally get your heart rate right back down to normal, but this actually had no effect on her. They immediately got the paddles to shock her heart. When they cut open her clothes, they noticed that she had an oily sheen all over her body. They could also smell the scent of garlic coming from around her mouth. Nurse Susan Kane rushed over to get her blood. As she pulled the blood, she reported that it smelled like ammonia to the respiratory therapist Maureen Welsh. Maureen, confused, then handed the blood sample to Dr. Julie Gorzinski. Dr. Julie lifted the sample and noticed unusual manila-colored particles floating in the blood. Confused, she turned to the doctor in charge, Dr. Okawa, and confirmed with him what she was seeing. Suddenly, Nurse Kane became unsteady on her feet. She swaggered a little bit and then collapsed in the middle of the ER room. The staff got her on a gurney, and as she came to, she said it felt like her face was burning. Then Dr. Julie Gorzinski became very weak and very lightheaded. She turned and walked out of the room to go sit down. As soon as she sat down, she actually slumped over and fainted. Amidst all the chaos, the staff rushed and got her a gurney and put her on it. When she got on the gurney, she began convulsing violently and having the same types of breathing issues as Gloria. Nurse Welch, the respiratory therapist, had been assisting with Dr. Julie with her breathing, but then she too became sick and passed out. When she woke up, she could not move her legs and her arms, losing all controlled movement of her limbs. More and more of the staff members began passing out and becoming ill. The head doctor, Okawa, immediately ordered for the entire hospital to be evacuated, except a tiny team to continue working on Gloria to try to save her life. Gloria unfortunately passed away at 8:50 p.m. But even the staff that stayed behind working on her began showing symptoms as well. Everyone that had been evacuated had been moved to the parking lot. Fearing that an airborne toxic illness had been released, all the staff stripped to the underwear and began washing off in the parking lot. Needing to contain Gloria's body, Nurse Sally Balderas went back into the building to move Gloria's body into the isolation unit. As soon as she got her into the unit and closed the door, she also began to vomit and feel burning sensations all over her body, and collapsed to the floor, convulsing and having extreme breathing problems just like the others. At 11 p.m., the hazmat team came into the building. They scoured everywhere, every floor, every vent, everything. They could not find any toxins in the entire building whatsoever. After the hazmat team left, the staff and everybody returned in the building so they could start treating all the people who were having problems. Nurse Sally was actually hospital for 10 days. Dr. Julie had gotten the worst of it, and she was in intensive care for 2 weeks. She had developed hepatitis, a vascular necrosis, which is where the bone tissue does not get enough blood and begins to die. After her stay in the hospital, she had to be on crutches for 9 months. In total, 24 of the 37 staff members of the hospital were made sick, and 5 had to be hospitalized for a good amount of time. 6 days later, Gloria's body was moved out of the isolation unit and into the coroner's office. The coroners had an airtight room that they were able to put her in, and when they worked on her body, they had to wear hazmat suits. In their initial autopsy, they found no evidence or obvious signs of any infection, and their official cause of death was cardiac dysrhythmia from kidney failure caused by the late stages of the cervical cancer. This obviously wasn't good enough, so they created a team of scientists from 10 different states. Additional tissue and blood tests were done. All that was found was CO2, nitrogen, and argon. Basically oxygen. The scientists working on this were extremely frustrated because it became known that unusual blood sample from that night and all the chaos of it was actually thrown away. Still not satisfied, they decided to put a sample of the tissue and blood in a gas coronerograph. What they found was amine, a form of ammonia, that could come from her body actually breaking down some of the nausea medicine that she had been taking. The next chemical that was found was niacinamide. That is a form of B3 that is found in many different foods, and it was only slightly elevated. The last thing that was found in the sample was dimethyl sulfoxide that can actually be used as a topical pain reliever. And this poor woman was going through the late stages of cervical cancer, so she was clearly in pain and she could have been putting it on. But many people use this, and it is actually non-toxic and harmless. Also, all of the hospital staff got tested, and there was nothing toxic in any of their systems. Then the state actually came out when scientists kept doing experiments and nothing was coming back, that no one had actually gotten sick and that all of the hospital staff had experienced a state of hysteria. Clearly, this infuriated the victims of the people who had been hospitalized. I mean, the 5 people that were in there and all the people that had fallen sick there. I can't even imagine how upset that would make me feel. Dr. Julie, who had gotten the worst of it, the 14 days in intensive care, actually sued the state for $6 million, stating that as a doctor, she didn't panic over a heart attack. This case went all over the news. Everybody in Southern California was glued to the TV trying to find out what had happened in this hospital. Many other scientists got involved and did every kind of experiment that they could think of, trying to find out what had happened. There's many different theories out there, but every single one of them can be disproved. Another scientist began studying something called dimethyl sulfone, which is only one oxygen molecule off of the dimethyl sulfoxide. He believed that when they put on the oxygen mask after she got out of the ambulance, that they had added the extra oxygen, changing the molecules in her bloodstream that created a gas that could have been toxic. That explained to him why the ambulance drivers were never affected. The problem with this theory is that, yes, it is a toxic chemical, but that is what is used to help create tear gas. And as we know, tear gas, one of the biggest symptoms that happens with it is that you cry horribly. I mean, I've smelled it before and my eyes swelled up and would not stop watering for hours after it. But nobody in the entire hospital had that symptom whatsoever. They had everything else imaginable: the fainting, feeling sick, the feeling of burning, the convulsions. Not one had reported crying. And obviously, when it comes to investigating something where people are getting sick and it could be something toxic, the biggest and most important thing about it is finding out what the symptoms were. That can decipher what the actual toxin is, because they're all different and how they affect people. Many scientists came out and proved that this could not be created outside of a lab. You had to have something special to be able to create the extra oxygen molecule to be able to come out and create this gas. Many respected scientists said that this was absolutely impossible. At the end of the day, there is no conclusive evidence that can truly come out and say, this is what happened. And the fact of the matter is, there was a woman who had late stages of cervical cancer that came into the hospital, and something happened that caused so many people 24 people in total to impact their lives and get sick, and all the other people who saw it happen. But we can't forget that Gloria Ramirez was a 31-year-old woman who had her whole life ahead of her. She did have 2 children and a husband that she left behind. So my heart goes out to her and her family. If you found the story interesting, please let me know. Thank you so much for stopping by again. And please don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. And I'll see you on the next one. Have a great day.